اضربني اضربني اضربني. ما تعرفش بتاخد في الارض خلاص. خليك برا.
محمد السلام يا ابو حميد. محمد دير بالك على حالك. سلم عمونا.
We all follow up the situation of the citizens of Sheikh Jarrah Neighborhood in occupied Jerusalem and the Israeli occupation colonial racist policy which aims to replace the indigenous citizens of the neighborhood with foreign Zionist colonizers. To know more about that, we have with us Muhammad Al-Kurd, a citizen of the neighborhood who has been communicating the story of the people of Sheikh Jarrah Neighborhood to the whole world since his childhood. Welcome to the program, Mr. Muhammad.
Welcome, thank you for having me.
Muhammad, your house, your family, your relatives, your friends, all the people in the occupied neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in occupied Jerusalem are threatened of expulsion by the Israeli occupation and colonial regime. How painful, how hurts is that? Tell me about your personal feeling and the feeling of the citizens of the neighborhood there.
Of course, the feeling is a lot of pain, but it's also a very familiar feeling because this is how, Palestine was colonized. Since 1948, we've seen neighborhood after neighborhood be destroyed and taken over by foreign settlers. So although it is a painful feeling and it's a stark situation to be living through me and my family and all of my neighbors, it's also a very familiar one.
Yes, Muhammad, you're living now in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood with your family and with your people. And we see the Israeli military checkpoints within the neighborhood and the steel barricades there. All that shows the apartheid system, the features, the characteristics of the apartheid system imposed by Israel on the Palestinian people. Tell us about the life of the people there under such a regime today.
Yes, so Sheikh Jarrah is effectively under a blockade, an illegal blockade, and it has been for over a month now. Palestinians are not allowed into the neighborhood, not journalists, not medics. Nobody that is Palestinian is allowed into the neighborhood. Even those of us who live in the neighborhood face challenges coming in and out of the neighborhood on a daily basis. However, Israeli settlers can walk in, no problems, no questions asked. They can even walk in with their guns, with their rifles. So yeah, it is, I think apartheid is an understatement, but I also think it's an accurate term to use to describe that one technicality of what's happening in terms of that blockade. We've also been seeing a lot of police violence in the neighborhood since the beginning of our Jerusalem uprising, since the beginning of our protests against ethnic cleansing in Sheikh Jarrah. And that's been really hard to deal with, and it's been also very hard to document with the crackdown on dissidents, with the crackdown on journalists, with the activists getting arrested one after the other in Sheikh Jarrah.
Yes, and Muhammad, to make things clearer, now the entry into Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood is prohibited to any Palestinian, not only coming from cities other than Jerusalem, even to the citizens of Jerusalem itself. Is that right?
Yes, even if you lived even if you lived in the street next to Sheikh Jarrah, you wouldn't be able to enter the neighborhood. Even if you lived in another part of Sheikh Jarrah, you wouldn't be able to enter the Uthman bin Affan street, which is where most of our houses are located. So yeah, it's not just for people who are outside of Jerusalem, it's for anybody and everyone who is not from the Uthman bin Affan street.
Yes, we know that representatives of international organizations, including from the United Nations, have visited you at your neighborhood, and they voiced your support for the people of Sheikh Jarrah and their objection to the Israeli colonial policy of expulsion and displacement. Does that serve your cause and might lead Israel to cancel its decision and to stop its colonial suppressive policy against the people of Sheikh Jarrah? What do you think about the results of their visits?
Well, across history, global representative international actors have been staunchly against Israeli settlements, no matter where they are, even the U.S. administration. But that doesn't mean that they've deterred Israel from committing more and more violations of international law, from committing more and more expulsions. You have the likes of UNRWA who are just condemning what's happening but not really taking any concrete actions. You have the likes of Antony Blinken condemning what's happening while effectively funneling almost $4 billion in military aid to the Israeli occupation regime. We need in Sheikh Jarrah, in Silwan, in Aysawiyah, in the South Hebron Hills, we need action, not just empty words and condemnations.
Yes, and in order to clarify to our viewers, Muhammad, Israel now is targeting the citizens of Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, but that would not be the end of the Israeli policy, as other neighborhoods are targeted like Al-Bustan, Batn al-Hawa, and Silwan. So the aim of this policy is to decimate the existence of the Palestinians in occupied Jerusalem. What is your take on that?
I don't think I agree with that. It's the very political objective of the Zionist project since let's say its crystallization in 1948 has been to expel, to eliminate the Palestinian population, the indigenous people that live on colonized Palestine, and it's been happening. Not only in Deir Yassin, not only in Lifta. It's happening in Silwan. It's happening in Al-Aysawiyah. It's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, and it's not going to begin and end with Sheikh Jarrah. The only difference is that the method in which it's taking place. In Sheikh Jarrah, for example, we have US registered settler organizations that are working at our displacement. In Silwan, the occupation municipality itself is doing that displacement. So there's many names and many actors that are working to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Jerusalem, from all over Palestine, but the goal remains the same, expelling the indigenous population.
Yeah, and the Israeli government and the Israeli colonizers try to portray this case as a dispute between the Palestinians of Sheikh Jarrah and the Israeli settlers or colonizers, and it is considered before the Israeli court. While we know that the Israeli government is using the judicial system to legitimize its colonial project. So what you tell the people who are watching our interview about the judicial system and the Israeli court and its consideration of your case?
I think I could cite international law, I could cite many things, but I think the one important element to cite is logic, right? If you are facing oppression, the oppressive entity is not going to be just and fair towards you. It is completely insane to assume that a colonial court, like the occupation courts, that was built by and for settlers, where the judges are settlers and the juries are settlers and the laws are written for settlers, it is inconceivable to think that these laws and these judges and these juries are going to be fair to the population, the very population they wish to exterminate. And I think more and more people around the world are recognizing the illegitimacy of the Israeli judicial system and recognizing that it cannot, functionally, it cannot deliver justice.
Yes. And Muhammad, my final question to you, because I know that you have another appointment and another interview. Now, the situation is very gloomy and a lot of oppression, a lot of injustice. But when we see hundreds of thousands of people in different capitals in the world take to the streets in solidarity with the people of Palestine, with the citizens of the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, how this gives you hope and gives you power and a faith that the Israeli colonial plan is going to fail?
It gives me hope because I know it's unprecedented. I know that there's never been such a support for the Palestinian people around the world in such a mainstream way, in such a way that speaks and urges for liberation, for Palestinian liberation from the river to the sea. I think that's a huge accomplishment. At the end of the day, I don't think that by itself is going to be enough. I think people need to continue pushing and protesting and pushing their governments, ultimately, who are complicit in Israeli apartheid and Israeli settler colonialism. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of direct action from many international actors. It's going to take a lot of sanctions. But does it give me hope? Absolutely. Does it give the people of Sheikh Jarrah and Palestinian people everywhere hope? Absolutely, because this is really the first time we're being supported, not just because we are victims, but because we are loud and clear about our right to resist in whatever way we see fit.
Muhammad Al-Kurd from Sheikh Jarrah Neighborhood in occupied Jerusalem, it has been a great pleasure for us to have you on our program. Thank you very much. Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching, and from me, Usama Nazal. Have a good time.